Well, welcome everyone to another great Boca Chamber virtual experience. My name is Jonathan Porges. I'm the market manager for Boynton Beach for the Chamber of Commerce. We're so excited to have you join us today for our Lunch and Learn. And we want to thank iThink Financial, who is the sponsor of our Lunch and Learn programming. And with us, we have Larissa, and so she'll say a few words about iThink Financial. Larissa?
Hi, everybody. Most of you know me. My name is Larissa Mazda. I'm the branch manager of the Boynton Beach branch of the iThink Financial Credit Union. Today, I just want to let you guys know that we are offering the SBA payment protection loan for your payroll protection loan for your employees, for any small businesses who are interested. It's a great loan. I know a lot of the bigger banks are not offering it at this moment. We are. To our members and our non-members who have to become members, which is easy process. If you're at all interested, you can shoot me an email at lnazdat@ithinkfi.org, which we'll get out to everybody after the presentation. And you guys can send over any requests or any questions you might have about that loan, and we'll get you started and help you out best we can to get through these times.
Great, thank you, and thank you for your continued sponsorship of the program. I'm going to have Sophia, my coworker, introduce herself, and she is going to talk about the question and answer phase and the survey that we'll be taking. So, Sophia.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Sophia. I'm the events administrator with the Boca Chamber. Just so everyone knows, a couple things. This entire presentation will be recorded. So you will receive a link after the event is over with an email with the YouTube link as well as upcoming events for the week. And we will be taking questions throughout the presentation as well as opening up to Q&A at the end. So if you would like to ask a question, you can use the chat box option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Once you click that, a chat box will pop up. You can either virtually raise your hand and then we can unmute you so you can speak and ask Lewis yourself your question, or you can just type your question in the chat box and myself or Jonathan will vocalize that to Lewis. Thank you.
Okay, so with that, I will introduce our speaker today. Lewis Fogel is the owner and president of Florida Sales Consulting, an authorized Sandler Training Center in Delray Beach. He empowers individuals, business owners, and corporations to improve their professional skills, implement consistent processes, and transform their company into a sales-centric, customer-driven team. Using the Sandler training methodology, Lewis addresses business-related issues such as sales and sales management training, leadership, coaching, goal setting, hiring assessment, lead acquisition strategies, communication, sales system, and process implementation. Lewis's diverse career spans managing and leading teams across the U.S. with a strong focus in the financial industry. He oversaw the relationship management of over 700 financial institutional clients, programs, managed services, and operations for several prestigious national firms, and was a co-founder and president of a broker-dealer. Earlier on in his career, he worked in international banking in Israel. Using his experiences to help others, Lewis has served on several corporate boards of directors and nonprofit organizations. He is the past president of the downtown Boca Raton Rotary Club and is active in serving his community and in helping others. And we are so very fortunate to have him with us today. And with that, Lewis, I will turn it over to you.
Jonathan, thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the April Boynton Beach Lunch and Learn. I think it's great that we can get together. I know the COVID-19 has kept us apart physically, but it's wonderful to see you all and know that we can still be in touch with each other. Speaking about being in touch, I'd like to talk a little bit about communications today and then open it up for other questions as well. I know that in a lot of the conversations I've been having with business leaders, with professionals in the community, they've been talking to me about some of the challenges they're having right now in running their businesses. So I'd like to start with a question, and you could, if you're willing to participate, I'd appreciate it in the chat box. I'd like to get a sense from you, if you would, is your business open for business right now? You can either do a yes or a no, or if you prefer the thumbs up or the thumbs down, give us a sense of what your business looks like right now. Are you open for business? See, Jackie says yes. Victor, yes. Good. Richard, yes. Excellent. Maureen, yeah. So several of you, it seems like everybody is open. So then the next question, you can still write the answers, always curious. Has business changed radically for you? So if you would just say, and now do caps if it's yes, and caps if it's no. Slightly, okay, David. Good. Somewhat. Excellent. This helps. So I find that as these are coming in, some of you, or it's radical, and some of you it's minor. I find that a lot of people are saying to me, well, how do I do business in this environment? So maybe today we'll take a little bit of time and talk about that as well, should time permit. But I'd like to focus on at first, and that's around some communication. But I'd like to get a sense, if Sophia is still with us, if she could just ask a question around how many people have participated before with the chamber in a meeting in let's say the last, I don't know, 90 days. Sophia, are you able to put that out?
Hi, Louis. Yes, I'm actually having some difficulties with the poll. So while I'm trying to get that up, if everyone could just put in the chat box again, have you participated in a Lunch and Learn within the past 3 months?
That'd be great. Thanks. So we got some regulars, we got some first timers. Rob says no, okay. I know Rob's in government affairs, so he's involved in the Boynton Chamber. So many of you have, and so for those of you who have before, welcome back. And for the people who are new members, especially Dave Fleischer, welcome as a new member. I hope you're gonna walk away today with some things that you can use. Some of this will be very familiar to some of you. Rob has been a client of Sandler for many years, so I know he's quite familiar with this. He could literally teach it. Nancy, I know Nancy Profit well. So for some of you, this will be old school, and for some of you, maybe you'll pick up some things that you can use right now in your business. So we talk about primary sensory dominance when we're speaking about communications, because there are people who are visual learners, and there are people that are auditory learners, and there are those that are kinesthetic. Now, when I say that, you say, well, I'm a combination, and that's not unusual. Most of us have a primary and a secondary. The majority of people out there are visual learners, and I'll tell you why that's important in just a moment. And followed by the kinesthetic learners. And a small percentage, about 20% of the population, represents auditory learners. Now, when we're in front of people and they're visual learners, clearly we should be speaking in and using our body language and our physiology to communicate with them. So in this example, we're using a slide deck, a PowerPoint, we're using a camera. That would be for visual learners very, very important. For auditory learners, it's going to be more about how they process the pictures in their mind as words and not as visual descriptions. And for those people who are kinesthetic or touch, feel, sensory, they're going to be more interested in how that affects them. So when you're speaking with people and you're talking to somebody, let's say, for example, that is an auditory person, how would you identify whether or not they're auditory learners or not? Because nobody walks around with a sign that says I'm auditory, right? But you'll hear them say certain things, like they'll use expressions like, oh, that rings true to me, or that's music to my ears, or Nancy, I hear what you're saying, makes sense. When you hear makes sense, kinesthetic, could be a combination. Or you'll hear them say, the way I picture this going down is as follows. I envision us using this process, this methodology. Let me write it out for you. And they'll literally take a pen or a marker and they'll begin to sketch it out. or you'll watch them sketch it out themselves as you're speaking to them, because that's how they're processing your communication, your information. Once you hear them say, you know, I get the feeling that this is going to work for my team, or my sense is this doesn't really make good sense to our organization, you're going to know that you're going to switch your language to a kinesthetic language. So people say, how hard is it? It's not hard at all. In the beginning, what you'll begin to do, if you're like me perhaps, is I would just take a piece of paper, and as I'm speaking to somebody and I see a clue, I'll do visual 1. I'll just do a little mark on the side of the sheet, like a check mark. Visual 2. And by the time they've used the third visual piece to me, I'll begin switching my language to be almost exclusively visual. If I'm speaking to a group such as this group, I know we've got a combination. So I'm not going to focus on just visual communication. I'm going to use things like, you know, I hope what you're hearing today will resonate with you. And if you'll see this picture that I'm going to paint, you may be able to apply it in your world. And if it feels right, you'll use it. There's an example where I've reached out to each 3 parts of the audience. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions or concerns or comments, because I want to give time for, and if you disagree, I'm totally cool with that. You could say, Lewis, I don't buy this. And we can have a nice conversation. Doesn't mean I'll change your mind. All right. So here are some of the characteristics of the visual people. I'll let you read the slide. After we go through these slides, your participation will be to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you, are you a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner? If you want to take pictures of this or whatever, go right ahead. And I'm going to move to the next slide in a few seconds. Okay. Here are auditory learners. As you're speaking to them, they'll process, and they'll actually sometimes look up. They're looking at the picture in their mind. They're creating the sounds that you're making, pictures in their head, translated from the words that you use. They oftentimes are distracted by sounds. So if you're speaking to somebody who's auditory and there's music playing, not their music, or there's somebody talking, you may lose their attention because they can be distracted by those other noises. So I'm going to go back and ask you again, if you would, are you a visual learner? Are you auditory? And you can just type V, A, or K. Or are you kinesthetic? So in the chat box, please type in either V, A, or K. Let's see what we got. So some of you are typing to all, that's fine, to everyone. Some are making it private. If you intend to make it only private to me, because I'm getting some that are private, that's okay too. But this gives me a sense. So what the population looks like is very, very similar, as I would expect, to the demographic population as a whole. Majority of people, visual, majority of people are kinesthetic, but we have a fair number of auditory learners. And there is this combo. So my suggestion would be, thank you for participating, by the way, in that poll. I appreciate it. My suggestion to you is think about somebody who you know very near and dear. Could be a partner, could be a love person, could be somebody who's in business with you. It could be all those things. Some of you are married to your partners. Identify what they are. Are they visual? Are they auditory? Or are they kinesthetic? And you may not know it right now, but I promise you, if you listen to them carefully today or whenever you can, you're going to begin to find out that they may be of a different type of learning process or communication process. And here's the secret. When you switch to mirror and match the way they process, visually, auditorily, or kinesthetically, you're going to be in much better communication with them. They will be tracking what you're saying much more easily than when we just do it in our natural style. Because your natural style or my natural style may not be their style. Is there a question, anybody? Okay. So I want to speak about the elements of communication. So I'd like you to think of a pie chart, if you would. And the pie chart is made up of 3 areas. Anybody have any idea what the 3 areas would be? You can just take yourself off of mute if you like. This is the part where you participate, by the way. I should have told you that.
Listening.
Listening, right. So part of it is listening, which we'll call tonality. Thanks, Victor. We've got some people in the chat box. Maybe they're more comfortable answering there. Let's see.
Hi, Louis. We actually had a question.
Okay, great.
Renata asks, what would you call someone who is processing information through reading and thinking about it?
So it's a good question. It's a great question, actually. So when we're reading, that visual side is, how we process is when you're reading. There isn't a choice. But if you said to me, Louis, I have somebody who's got books on audio, audio file or Audible, and they much prefer Audible, it may be because they're driving and they like reading, but because there's so much time either in a car or in a plane, they switch that. But if there's a choice between the two, oftentimes the auditory learner will, instead of reading a text, will listen to a text. I'm not sure I fully answered your question, but you're going to process, if you're reading, a little bit differently than if you are a text-driven visual person. That's the best I can give you an answer. If somebody has a better, more full answer, I'd love to learn it as well. Great. So we talked about the spoken word, and we're going to talk about tonality, which is really what Victor was talking about a moment ago. And the third part is body language. So here we are all together on this call. We're able to see each other. We're able to hear each other. The only thing we can't do is literally touch each other, right? But if for argument's sake, I couldn't see you and you couldn't see me, body language goes away. And then we're left with words and tonality. So when we say spoken words, oftentimes we'll say spoken words and or text, because people are going to interpret your words differently and the tonality differently. Body language is the most predominant or prevalent part of communication when you look at this pie chart. So body language represents more than 50%. Some say it's 55, some say it's as much as 75%, but let's agree it's north of 50%. So if I have a choice, I'd much rather have somebody in front of me, either visually on a meeting like this where we see each other, or candidly face to face. But if we don't, then we're stuck with tonality, and tonality becomes the most important part of it, because tonality represents about 1/3 as well. Somebody's saying they'd like to see the chart. So let me see if I've got the chart on here. Hold on one sec. Here we go. Sorry about that. Thank you for asking for it, Jackie. So in the world that we're in right now, we can see each other. But if we're not able to see each other, then all of a sudden that body language goes away. And oh my gosh, the tonality becomes critically important. In the words, so let's pretend we're not able to talk to each other, but we can write to each other. So I'm going to write to Jackie Reeves. Jackie had a question, something happened, and she said to me, did she steal the money? And I said to Jackie, Jackie, she didn't steal the money. I typed it out in a text. Jackie, she didn't steal the money. So when you hear that, you say, well, how do I interpret that? Well, it's up to the reader to interpret it because it's missing all tonality. Let me give you an example. Jackie, I didn't say she stole the money. So there was money stolen, but I didn't say she stole it. Jackie, I didn't say she stole the money, which implies she stole something, but it may not have been the money. So you get the picture, right? So what happens when we're using text, and we use text a lot in this world, and too much email, in my opinion, our communication can break down. Our ability to communicate clearly can be at risk. So if you have to use the written word, only emails, only text, maybe use some emojis, because otherwise you're subject to interpretation. I much prefer, you've heard me say, being in front of somebody either by computer, by Skype, by Zoom, or in the room with them. But if I can't, even if I have to leave them a voicemail message, which all too often we do, my voice will send a message. And it will sound something like this. Jackie, I know you've tried to reach out to me several times this week, and I'm really sorry. I'm not in the office. I suspect you're not either. So my apologies to you. I know it's really important you and I get together. Could you shoot me maybe 2 or 3 times? I promise you, I will make it work this time. So you heard in my voice pauses. You heard breath, literally, where I blow some air across the microphone. So she can get a sense from me that I'm serious, that I know she wants to reach me, and I'm apologetic. So I'm going to suggest to you, use your voice to your advantage and begin to mirror and match the way the other person speaks. So if they speak slowly, slow down your speech. If they use certain words that they're comfortable with, in the right place at the right time, use those words. Some people use, hokey things like, that dog don't hunt. Maybe if you're down south, you may hear somebody say that. Well, they're telling you that solution doesn't work. Well, at the appropriate time in the appropriate place, I'd probably play that back to them. But if they say things to me like, around here, we don't do it that way, I'll go back to them somewhere in the conversation and say, around here, my guess is you don't do it this way. And I'll play it back somewhere within the communication, that same conversation. If I'm in the room with the person and I'm looking at the body language and I'm reading the body language, if I walk into a room and I get a sense, maybe I'm overdressed for the meeting, I may literally just take my shirt sleeves, unbutton them, and roll them up. If the person is wearing an open collar shirt, a blouse, and I feel like I'm overdressed, and if I happen to be coming in with a tie, I may literally either open my tie or take off my tie. If I'm wearing a jacket and they're wearing, again, something less formal, I will begin to set the stage so that they feel more comfortable in communicating with me as far as that goes. If they're using their hands and they're crossing their hands, I will begin at some point in time, not immediately, to mirror and match their body language. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions or comments. Okay, and this is to everyone, so I'll read it out. I use mainly phone and internet communication to do business. There's definitely a lot of people express from even just that way, they speak to you. Absolutely. So when we lose our sight, for those who don't have sight, we know that one of the senses that they develop will be their hearing. It becomes super, super sensitive. So I'm going to suggest to you, if you're using the internet, VoIP or telephone or cell phone communication primarily, you really got to be a good listener. Your ears have to become super, super tuned to what's going on. So that's a good comment, Victor. Thanks. So, question, who are you? In the chat box, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, VAK. All right, so I'd like for you, as I said a moment ago, I'd like for you to think about your partner. And now, if you know, if you don't, that's perfectly okay. I'd like you to type in lowercase your partner or the person you know best. What are they? And you can either write same, if they're the same as you, or different. Okay, so for the ones that are the same, you have it really easy. You can communicate very easily with your partners. For the ones that are different, then you know what you have to do, right? You just got to adjust. If you want to be understood and you want to communicate more effectively, it will be very, very helpful if you change your style to meet and match theirs. And I know Nancy works with a lot of organizations, and I don't know if you hear this, Nancy, from people you work with, but I've heard over the years, the leader of an organization said, well, I'm the boss. They should listen to me, and they should communicate the way I communicate. And I always get a kick out of that because I find that they don't do as well as they think they're doing by forcing everybody to communicate in their style. And when we change, we really make a big difference in communicating more effectively with them. So I want to talk a little bit about DISC in the time that we have. And the question, I don't know if we have the poll open or not, if Sophia is still with us. We had a question in the poll, and that is, how many people are familiar with DISC, DISC? So I'll give you a moment to answer that.
I think we're having trouble with the poll.
Not a problem. We're working the chat box just fine. So everyone's very, very familiar with that. Oh, good. We got a lot of people familiar. Fantastic. So this will be, as I said earlier, for some of us, just a refresher, and for a few people, maybe just a little new information. So DISC is really a very easy way to help us understand behavioral characteristics and profiles of people. And it's broken into, as you see in the upper right, the D, the I, and the S, and the C. And we're not going to get tied up with the, you know, what D stands for, I stands for, because that's really not what's relevant. Don't get hung up on what it says. But what's more important is understand the people. So people on the top, the D's and the C's, I don't know if you could see my mouse moving back and forth. These are task-oriented people, all right? And the people on the bottom, the I's and the S's, these are more people-oriented. Now, it doesn't mean if you're one, you can't do both. And it doesn't mean that if you're a high D, you can't be the opposite, a high S. But because there is no better DISC. All DISCs are just as good as everyone else's DISC. But it does mean, and I'll show you in a moment, how it's to change your style, behavioral style, requires more energy. And it requires you to be deliberate in doing it. So here's the question, since we have a lot of people that already know DISC a little bit or more than a little bit, I know several of you do, please put down with your, and again, there's a combination for most of us, it's 2 or 3 of these, put down just your major one. So if you know it, please put down in the chat box, are you a D, an I, an S, or a C, please? Now, those of us who know Rob know he's a C for sure. Nancy, it says D, no surprise, yeah. Hi, D. Yeah. Not sure, that's fair. Okay, by the end of this, you'll be sure, I promise you. All right, so as I said to you earlier, there is no better or worse DISC, but we'll talk about how do you use DISC again to understand first your own DISC and others that are around you to communicate more effectively. So Nancy is a high D, as she shared with us, or a D, and no surprise. Well, the population of Ds in the world is actually, in North America, is the smallest. It's about 12% of the general population. But when you get into the C-suite, where she is, that actually doubles. It's about 25% of the population. So when you're talking to the CEO, the COO, the CMO, the COO, et cetera, those people have a disproportionate number in the D category. So if you don't know who somebody is, there's a couple of things you could do that will be helpful. If you're a subscriber to LinkedIn, and a paid subscriber to LinkedIn, and if you buy an add-on, they have something called Crystal Knows. That will give you a pretty good idea of the person you're looking at on LinkedIn. But you don't need to do that. You'll be able to understand this very quickly in just a matter of minutes. So when somebody's rather direct, they're to the point, they speak in shorter sentences, they perhaps even write in shorter sentences, those people are going to be more D-like. And how you speak to a D would be different than how you would speak to the opposite, an S. Those people are a little bit more, I would say, extroverted, sometimes come off as a little bit rough, the Ds, but the Is are more extroverted too, and they're much more, you know, the happy-go-lucky, the people who are at the party, who are the life of the party. And the people on the S's, the steady relators, those are people that are more interested in family and team, and they're always saying yes to whatever you ask them to do. A little bit more quiet, perhaps. And the C's, as Rob put up there, he's a high C. Those are people that are much more analytical. They're much more interested in being right in their answers, and they'll contemplate, and they will contemplate, and they will contemplate, and analyze, and analyze, and analyze until you say, oh my God, just give me the answer, please, if you're a D like me. But they want to get it right. And so there's a beauty in having people like this on your team. Let's see what just came into the chat. So here's a private chat. I find that as I grow in life, my career, and my career, I went from left to right and bottom to top of the screen. So that comes up from time to time. Primarily, what changes is your adaptation. So you have a natural profile, and we all have an adaptive profile. So what might happen is this person's writing to us is correct. Their positions can change, and they will adapt to the position. They might have been at one level before, but primarily, if you started off as a high S, you're going to be primarily an S. But your adaptation is not unusual. That is not unusual at all for most of us. All right. So let's take a look. Give you some information here. For the sake of time, I'll fill it in now. Oops, sorry about that. So I said 12%, I apologize, it's 14%. So if you look at the people who are on the D side, their focus is on results. They're gonna let you know where you stand with them, whether you like it or not. They're direct, they're blunt. They oftentimes will use the word me, mine. They don't typically say, and again, If they know what they're doing, they can adjust, and you may not know that they're a D, but they don't typically talk about the team. They don't typically talk about us. They don't typically talk about ours. Excuse me. Versus, if you look at the S's, they hardly ever use the word me. They never use the word mine, or seldom. It's all about us, ours, my team, our organization, and their focus is in a different way. Excuse me. Depending upon whom I'm talking to and who I'm working with, I read what my mood is like, what my goals are that day, etc. Could be any. All right. Should you aim to be a little bit of all of these? Well, it's a good question. So Victor, it's a great question. So what you should try to do is be that to the person you're in front of. So if I know, going back to Nancy, let's pretend that I was an S and Nancy's a D. My conversation with Nancy Prophet may be, Nancy, I know you're going to want to make a decision, so I don't want to hold you back. Let me stop there and see which way you'd like to move. It's very quick. It's very short. She's in command. She's in charge. That's how I would speak to a D. But if I'm speaking to Rob Jager at Plum Productions, knowing that he's a C, my conversation with Rob is going to be directed to a C. It's going to be, Rob, there's probably a lot of questions you have for me. And I know that if I don't give you enough detail, just stop me and ask me to, drill down a little bit further. I'm happy to do that. And that's how I'd speak to somebody who's a C. All right, just looking at the questions as they're coming in. I'm not going to touch that one, Mark. It's a loaded question. It has to do with politics. I'm going to stay out of it, but it's a good question. And everybody can use their imagination on that one. So here's the thing. Is it hard to do this? Not at all. It just takes some practice. So first question I'm going to ask you is, do you know who you are? If you know what your disc is, that's great. If you don't, there's some easy, simple ways to identify your disc. Again, if you go back to Crystal Knows and you go and you log on to them, it's not the highest form of disc you can take, but it's enough to give you an indication where you're at, and you won't have to spend a ton of money to do it. If you want to take assessments, there are people out there in this world, myself included, and Nancy, I'm sure, others that use various assessment tools. I would suggest you should, if you're interested in this, go further and learn more about these tools, either directly or indirectly. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions around DISC, because it's a topic that we could literally spend hours on. All right. What I'm going to do there is stop the share and come back in and just talk a little bit about today, what's going on in your world with the clients and the customers and the prospects. My question is, are you prospecting today? Are you out looking for new business? And my suggestion would be, we shouldn't stop prospecting, but right now what we should do is stay very close to our clients, very close to our customers. Let's just see this chat that came in here. Okay, so Mark says, talk about a person who doesn't do all of them. Mark, I'm not sure I understand the question. It's probably a very good one. Would you mind taking yourself off mute, or just either way you're more comfortable communicating with us?
Yeah, hi Lewis and everybody. So let's say you have a person that you know fits in one of those categories, but there's a couple items that they don't do. Like they don't ask you questions because they're very direct. So that kind of person. The majority of the items are in that category, but they're so into themselves that they don't do two of those things.
Let me see if I understand the question. So and if I don't, please stop me. So you're speaking to somebody and they don't fit into the box, if you will, of the different things that were described there. Is that close to what I'm hearing, or am I off?
Yes, so the person that you know who I'm talking about, which I won't say to everybody, there's 2 items on there that they don't do because everything is about them. And so would you still put them in that box even though they don't do those 5 items?
Yeah, it's rare that everybody does all the things in the box.
Okay.
And then you've got behavior that falls outside of the norm, where people get labeled with psychiatric terms, and then that's a whole different area.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
That's a good question. Very good question.
Thank you.
Other questions? Other comments? Rob, any thoughts? I know you know this pretty well. Nancy, any thoughts from you? I think we be collaborative here. It will probably be helpful to everybody on the call.
First, Louis, you're doing a tremendous job with this. This is an outstanding job getting
Well,
all of
thank
us
you.
involved and keeping us focused on what the task at hand, which is communication. I think one of the things to remember about this is that we all demonstrate all 4 of these behavioral styles, personality styles, but it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
And so while, Mark, you're talking about someone that may not have the other 2 characteristics, there is probably something along the line. If a given situation came up, those 2 other characteristics may pop up. But again, it's painting with a broad brush. I know, if somebody says to me, "Hey, Nancy, do you know your background?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm a Heinz 57. I have relatives from everywhere." Well, that's kind of how the disc is. Depending on the situation, I'll be the first to celebrate Passover. I'll be the first to celebrate my Irish heritage, and I'll be the first to go to Oktoberfest. And depending on the situation, we'll all demonstrate each of these styles. And Louis, you've done a tremendous job isolating. But to your point, we all seem to have a primary one.
Yeah, it's well said, Nancy. And I think for people who've been in my class, like Rob and others on this call, JJ, they'll always say, "I can't believe you're a high DC." Well, if I were going to try to be an instructor in my natural high D, I wouldn't have but maybe a couple of D clients at best, and I'm not even sure I'd have them. So you have to, it's situational. Well said, Nancy. Rob, anything you want to add to that?
I'm sorry, I had to unmute. I called in. I don't know that I would have too much to add, other than there are a series of questions that you can use to narrow down somebody when you're talking to somebody directly, that are subtle and help you understand which of the discs they are. And I think that's one of the other elements that's really helpful to know.
Well, I think you're right. And why don't you share with us a question that you might use when you go out in the world of plum production to find out which of their disc, what their disc style is.
Yeah, well, if we're in a meeting, we'll be talking about something and getting into the details. I might, before we get too far into it, I might ask the question of, hey, I'm going to get into a whole bunch of detail because I know that's me, right? And but before I start, is there a certain level? Maybe you want to have it from 30,000 feet or from 3,000 feet. How much detail do you want to get into this? And at least there, I can figure out, all right, they're going to be more of a detailed type of person, or they're going to be more of a just push through all the details. I don't care about all the details, just make it happen. And I have found that those that don't want to see a lot of the details are typically the type that will make decisions faster as well. So I have to watch for that cue. When I see they're saying certain things, I need to say, oh, let's let them make the decision before I mess that up. You know what I mean?
Good job. Good job, both of you. So anybody else want to add anything? Either a question or a comment?
We have a question from David, but I think maybe Rob might have covered that. So David, if you want to unmute yourself. And
I was just saying, definitely at times being a very high D or high D, high I, I do have trouble switching back and forth or in the moment reflecting the other person's style and then adapting to it at that moment as well. So if you have any strategies for that, other than listening really well or whatever it may be, that would be great.
So, when I meet people who are high Ds, to Nancy's point, they may be high DIs or they may be high IDs. And so although Nancy says she's a high D, but she also has a tremendous amount of I in her. So if I were to go into a meeting, and I'll just use COVID-19 as an example, and I came in as Debbie Downer, if you will, and say, oh my God, everything's terrible. The world is collapsing. You can't sell anything. You can't buy anything. You can't see anybody. You know, my life is destroyed. Well, somebody's got a lot of I in them, somebody who's a people person, who is very upbeat, I'm turning that person off very, very quickly. So I have to be careful, David, in terms of how I go about approaching somebody. So I like questions rather than statements. And I'd suggest if we could speak, I don't know, 30% of the time and get our customers, our clients, our prospects, our friends speaking 70% of the time, we'd learn a lot more than when we're speaking. So I'll typically start out, if I'm right now calling an existing account, I'll start off by saying something like this. Hey, Nancy, this is Lou, and I know you probably weren't expecting my call right now. I'm just reaching out to some of my clients to find out whether or not you folks are open for business or have you temporarily closed the business. So that's my icebreaker conversation. I don't know which way Nancy's going to go with this conversation. Is she going to sound upbeat? I'm going to follow her tempo. If she's not, I'm going to modulate mine. But if Nancy says to me, you know, Lou, actually, we're doing quite well. Thanks for asking. Our clients need us more today than probably they did 2 weeks ago, a month ago. Awesome. Tell me more. So instead of me telling them what I want to say, I want to hear what she has to say. Tell me more. So my expressions are going to be, that's interesting. Could you highlight that? Could you amplify that for me? Could you share a little bit more with me and let her or him continue to talk? And as they do, I'm going to begin to see where they're coming from. Jonathan, I want to be sensitive to time, and so I'm going to turn back the floor to you and let you take it from here. And I'm around. I'm here to answer questions if I can, or offline as well.
Yeah, thank you. This was a great presentation, and we really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to hear you and the great information shared today. I want to encourage everybody to check their communications from the Chamber, as we do have other great virtual experiences coming up this week and weeks in the future as well. So with that, if there are not any, we have something just popped up here. Sorry, let me just double check.
While you're checking the chat, I'll just mention to people that for the month of April, I'm doing training for people virtually at no cost whatsoever. If you're interested in participating in our sales training, you can follow us on Facebook or through LinkedIn and just send us an email. I'm happy to include you in our class.
Okay, with that, we thank everybody for joining us this afternoon and have a great day. And thank you again, Louis and Larissa.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe.